Hello everyone. Hello. Hello. Welcome to the 11th event of Speck&Tech. Is the volume enough? Yeah. Okay. This time we decided to call it Data-Driven Society. Giulio, you want to say that?
Yeah. It's true.
Yeah.
And this is the logo.
This is the logo.
Almost. Nailed it.
It's not going.
Forse ho spento il telecomando. Yes!
Okay, yeah, this is the logo. Okay, so thanks everyone for being here. It's a pleasure, especially because tonight there was the Champions League, we noticed later.
And rain.
And it was raining a lot, so you were kind of sort of heroes. Thank you again for being here. I would say make an applause.
Yeah, very brave.
Okay, we decided to wait a couple of more minutes just to be sure that everyone was here. And then we can start with our sponsors. First one, as always, we have Impact Hub. Julie, if you want to say a few words.
Yeah, Impact Hub is the place where you are at now. For those of you, this is the 10th time that you are hearing this, sorry. And you can rent a space. It's basically a co-working space, so you can get a desk and do your work from here. They expanded to new spaces, so the open space right now is quite empty. So if you want to make the big jump and become independent, this is the time for doing it. Then Becca, which is my company, we are developing software and designing interfaces. We are sponsoring the event from the day zero, and we are making this happening as much as we can with IT Digital.
And IT Digital is the organization I'm working at. If you're in tomorrow, we're having an event at the Open Space in Povo. Sorry about that. We are having this event in the Open Space in Povo, where we will discuss about the call for 2018 for application for organization and partners that want to make, for example, new courses or new projects together with the IT Digital and a number of partners. And for people that might be interested, if you're at the third year of the bachelor, there are still a couple of days to apply for the master, and next year there might be a new one starting in automotive systems, so also self-driving cars, drones, and this kind of stuff. And then, as always, Segata.
Yeah, which is our favorite sponsor. They are providing super tasty speck and prato magno and cheese and a lot of other stuff. So please serve yourself after the talks. And no, wait. Okay. And tonight's sponsor, except from the usual ones, is no one, so beers are up to Speck&Tech organization, so please be more kind than usual, because otherwise next time it's Biob, which means that you bring your own beer. And we never lost money bringing beers right now, so, and we've never been rich taking beers here, so no big deal, but please be kinder than usual, because we're a very poor organization. So, okay, and last thing, on the 13th of May, there is the Java User Group, which is another event. Since we are a super kind organization, we want to sponsor every kind of nerd event here in Trento. So if you're interested in Java and stuff, like Android and whatever, this is the place you want to be.
And finally, as always, we have our website, Speck&Tech, where you can find all the issues and all the previous slides and the events. And last time I was told that don't stress enough that we have a Telegram channel. How many people of you are not in the Telegram channel? Not in the Telegram channel?
Yeah.
Okay, quite a lot. Okay, if you go on Telegram and you look for Speck&Tech, you can find us there as well. We try not to spam, it's maximum 1 message per day. Especially when it comes closer.
No one per day. No.
Especially when it comes closer to the events. Otherwise, there's nothing for 10 days.
It's more like 3 per month.
Yeah. And okay, last thing, association. It's a very serious stuff, especially because we are growing. We are having already 11th events, and we are trying to gather the money from you for the donation that you leave, that we spend the next time on the beers and in the food. So this can work, of course, but if we want to make it cooler and have cooler people that come to our events and then present and invite them from abroad or from other countries or from other cities, we need to pay their travel, but we need to pay them. So if we want to make it cooler, we decided that we want to make an association and to make this a bit more formal and a bit more legal. So what we're trying to do in the next upcoming months is to kind of set up a legal association where you will pay once at the beginning of the year, and you will be part of the community, and you can access all the events, and also if you want to sustain the community, you can drop a coin, otherwise you're fine for that. And of course you can have a wonderful t-shirt from us. We asked the Serious Graphia, they're really cool guys making the t-shirt. They made the t-shirt for Belka and also for the event I'm wearing that.
Yeah, so basically Speck&Tech is a Serious Graphia
brand.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, but they're really cool. They make awesome t-shirts, and we plan to have these since the upcoming months. Okay, thank you for the introduction. Thank you for listening, everyone. And I guess we can start with the first speaker that we have here, Bruno LEPRI from FBK.
Yeah, big applause. Yes, welcome.
Works? Yes. So, my name is Bruno LEPRI. I work in FBK part of the time, and the rest of the time at MIT Media Lab. So I split, I do a couple of months in Boston and the rest of the time in Trento. So the work I want to present is what we usually do with my group in FBK. And so the idea is let you show how we can use the data that we live around during our daily life to understand and to modify, maybe in a better way, the society where we live. So right now what we do every day using several types of technology like the smartphone or the credit card transaction or the smart card, you use all the day. So it's leaving a lot of digital breadcrumbs, so a lot of personal data that are a way to understand your behavior, your social interaction, your mobility pattern, your interest. That is totally new, and it's something that is creating a new science that is called computational social science, and is also used to doing a novel kind of technology, novel kind of company, and also try to modify the cities and the communities where we live. So one example, the one that is more used in the presentation, is the usage of the smartphone. So the data that you live with the mobile phone. So these data are the call detail record, are the data that are used by the telco company, the telecommunication company, for billing purposes. So you can, from this data, infer the mobility of a person. So given that every kind of event you do with the mobile phone, you connect to a cell tower, and so you can reconstruct the movement, the pattern movement of a single individual. Then you can reconstruct the social interaction, so you can get from the log of the call and the log of the SMEs, you can reconstruct the social network and the social interaction of your customer, the people you are looking to. And you can also understand, monitoring the airtime expenses, you can detect some economic changes and crises, and so having a proxy for the economic activity. This is the first work, really important work that was done using the mobile phone data. It was done by Nathan Eagle in MIT, was published in Science in 2010. So what they look at the network you can build from a given county in UK to the other counties. So they look how London is connected with Birmingham, how Birmingham is connected with Manchester, and so on. And they do both the social and spatial network diversity. And what it emerges is that a place is more rich if has a more diverse set of interaction. So to make a place or a city richer, you need to have this place connected with a set of unique and different places. And this was used for example, estimating the poverty. This is a challenge that we organized with MIT several years ago in Ivory Coast. And what we did is that Orange opened the call detail record for all the country, and researcher can participate to the challenge, can use this data and present some or project or research paper or some application, where the idea was doing things for the social good, so it was sponsored also by the United Nations. And one of the things that was done by some researcher was using the mobile phone data to rebuild a sort of poverty maps that usually are built using the census data, but the census data are usually not updated, so you can do in this country, you have information every 10 years, while using mobile phone data you can do almost in real time. So another thing that was done again from MIT was using the mobile phone data to tracking the employment shock. So what they did, they take an example of a company that was closed, a big company in US, and they look how the mobility pattern and the social interaction of the people change in the area. Then with this signal, with this feature, they use this signal to predict in other places the level of unemployment. And were quite and the result was that this signal were very predictable, very predictive of the unemployment of the different areas. Another interesting thing, this is a project that we are doing in Saudi Arabia. So Saudi Arabia gave to us information about the people that are losing the job. We have people that when they lose the job are very good in finding a new job, while you have other people that are not good in the same way. So the goal of the project was understanding how a person is able to successfully finding a new job and why others are not. So one of the things that Saudi Arabia was interested in is looking in how the program that they have to improve the skill, like the language skill or the technological skill of the people count. But this program count almost nothing, count for around 10–20% in letting a person finding a new job. The things that count more is the surname of the person, because it's a familiar and tribal society. But another things that count and count for the 40% of the goal of finding a new job is the network of social interaction you are building. So what is emerging from our study is that usually people, when lose the job, reduce the number of social interaction and the number of places that they visit, but this is very bad. So the good strategy is instead increase this kind of interaction, because as Granovetter, that is a sociologist quite famous, said, so it's the strength of the weak ties that make you finding a job, and this is a strong role that this kind of connection have. This is, for example, the same idea on which LinkedIn is built. So the idea of putting the people in connection, and in particular the people that are not the friends or the co-worker, but the acquaintances and other people like it. So saying is the sentence that was said by the Ministry of the Labor in Italy, Poletti, was not so wrong. So it's more important a soccer game sometimes than the skills that you are improving. So this is another work that we are doing in several places. This is the first one that we did in UK, in London. So we have data from Telefonica and from the Open Data Institute, and the data from Telefonica were a sort of more smart type of mobile phone data. So we have information on how many people with some demographic characteristic and with gender information and so on were moving in several parts of the city each hour. And then we have also information from the Open Data Institute about the number of crime in this area. And what we did is that we used the mobile phone data, some of the features that we can extract from the mobile phone data, to predict which are the areas with more crime and the area with less crime. what we found is that, for example, again, so in this case, the diversity of a place is very important to make the place more safe. And in this way, we test one of the theory of the sociologist that is Jane Jacobs, is an urban activist, that she introduced this idea, looking at Manhattan and other city, Toronto, for example. She introduced the idea that people work as a sort of eyes on street. So if you have people around all the time, the place is more safe, not less safe. And this is what emerged from our study. So what we found is that, for example, places like the downtown in the American city, when we look at the American city, they are full of people during the working hour, but then they became empty, and usually these are the places where you have more crime during the night and during this period of time. While a good place is a place where there are people walking all the time, so there are pedestrians all the time. So this is also something that could be useful here in Trento, where closing pub or places where people hang out is not the good way to make a place more safe, but is the opposite. So another thing that we try to understand is why some cities are alive, like New York, and why some cities are not anymore, like Detroit. The interest of city is given from the fact that the majority of the people is moving to city, to live in city, and city are very important place where you have a systematic acceleration of the social activity, so you have this emerging of more and more human interaction. You have an acceleration of the economical output, so you have a super linear increase of things like the GDP, the number of patents, the wage, and so on. But you have also problems. So you have more pollution, you have more fast spreading of contagious disease, you have more crime. So again, we look at this theory of this urban activist. The fact of this urban activist is that she wrote this book that was quite important because several cities in US then were designed on the basis of this book. It's a book around the 50s and the 60s that was written, but was written only based on observation and not on data. So she wrote because she wanted to save Manhattan from a big reconstruction, so they want to destroy the Greenwich Village neighborhood and build skyscraper in old Greenwich Village. And so to avoid these things, she wrote this book, where she says that the death of a city is caused by the elimination of the pedestrian activity of the people around, while the life is created by a vital urban fabric that you have all over the day. So what we did is that, this is something that I did with one of my students, so we look at the 4 diversity conditions that make the urban vitality of a place. So we look at the land use, the small block, the building, the age of the building, and the density. So the idea is that in the theory of Jane Jacobs, you need to have more than one use of the place. So the place should be not only residential, not only commercial, but a mix of the two things. In order to have people all the time, you need to have small blocks. You need to have both new and old buildings, because one of the problems is that if you have only new buildings, so some of the places, like some of the company, like a new startup, would have problem to pay the rent of a new building, or also you have not a mixture of population there. And you need to have a density of population and a density of employed population in the place. So what we did is operationalize all these diversity conditions using open data. Mainly we use Foursquare data and OpenStreetMap data. So we, for example, derive the size of the block from OpenStreetMap. We look at the number of intersections and so on. Then we need a proxy to understand the vitality of the place, and we use mobile phone data. And in this way, so we use mobile phone internet activity as a proxy of urban vitality, and we calculate the activity density in a given district in the hour of the day. We did the work for 6 Italian cities, big Italian cities, so Rome, Milan, Turin, and we did for a period of time of 6 months. So what we found is that, so using the metric from the theory of Jane Jacobs and from our open data, the diversity condition, you can predict the vitality of the place, or the amount of people active there, with an R-square of 77, that is quite high. And then we also can understand which are the metric that count more. For example, the employment density is the metric that count more than all the other. There is also an important role, for example, of the land use, or of the mixture of the land use, and also of the small blocks and the intersection density. There is something different from the theory of Jane Jacobs that we found with our data-driven approach. That is the role of the age building. So they don't count as in US, maybe because there is a more diversity of age of building in Italy than you have in the United States. Then we moved to a different project. So some friends in MIT, Cesar Hidalgo, that is a professor in MIT, is collecting these Google Place images, Google Street View images for more than 100 cities around the world, and with the crowdsourcing system is asking to the people to annotate these images. So one of the questions is, for example, which place looks safer in the two pictures. And so he's getting a lot of data and a lot of score for all the pairs of images, and is building a ranking of the places for all the cities in the world that are perceived as safe and the places that are perceived as less safe. So what we try to do is that we again move from a sociological theory, in this case the theory of broken windows, so the idea that some mismanagement of the city can drive to some crime, to misbehavior and then crime. So this theory is quite important because it was used for a period of time in New York City by Rudolph Giuliani. So there is the idea that graffiti and these kind of things move to misbehavior, and then having misbehavior you have an increase of the crime in the place. So the other two theories that we'll look to are again the Jane Jacobs theory and the Oscar Newman theory. Again, in this case, we were looking at things like which are the aspects of the building or of the city that make a city perceived as safer. For example, one of the things in the theory is the street-facing window. So if you have building with street-facing window, the place is perceived as more safe. So the appearance came from, the safety perception came from the images, the Google Street View images, and the liveliness, so the amount of people around, came again from the mobile phone data. So this is the data collection that was done from MIT, and this is the aggregation that we did. So what we did is that we have for some part of the city, in particular we are using a couple of Italian cities, Rome and Milan. We have some images annotated with the score of safety, perceived safety. What we did is that we train other images and we extend our labeling to other part of the city using some computer vision approach. On the other side, we again we need to have a proxy for the liveliness, and in this case we have more interesting data from Telecom Italia. These data were given to us from the skill lab in Trento, because in this case they give to us not only the amount of activity you have in a given area, but we have also some demographic information. So we have in general the people around the district, then we have the fraction of the female in the district, the fraction of the people below 30 and above 50, so the youngest and oldest one, and so on. And then what we did is a simple progression, so we tried to fit the information that we have from the images to predict and to explain the liveliness in the different districts of the city. What is emerging is that, for example, the places that are perceived as more safe are places where you have more women around. And the interesting thing is that you have more women around also if you take in consideration the amount of women that live in the place. So it's a place that is attractive, that let come more female around than the people that really are living there. And also it's this feature is more significant and predictive of other things that are the things that usually sociologists use, like the deprivation index of the place. So it counts more the safety appearance to understand which kind of people you have around than, for example, the deprivation on the real risk that you have in a given place. Then the computer vision part that we did, as I said, we needed to have more images labeled with this safety score. So what we did is using some deep learning approach, some convolutional neural network. And what the convolutional neural network approach led us to do was to also look which are the element of the images that count in the perception of the safety. So we can obscure some of the part of the images and look how the algorithm changed the prediction. We can, for example, save some of the layer of our network to understand which are the patches of the images that count more in understanding the perception of safety. One of the examples here is that count a lot the street-facing windows, as the theory of Jane Jacobs was proposing. And also other information, like, for example, the presence of the green or the presence of Victorian houses. These are all information that count to make a place perceived as more safe. So why is this important? Because now we have some tools to measure the aesthetic of the city. We can also estimate the consequences of these choices, the choices that urban planners do. And so we can try to have tools to understand which is the value that you can have on the life of the cities, improving the aesthetics of a neighborhood. So this is a project we are doing with Sandy Penton and other people in MIT. So we have this Lego, so we have this dashboard where they are based on Lego, and we have some simulation on what we can do. So this dashboard are built mimicry some of the city for which we are working. For example, we have one of these projects for the entire country of Andorra, we have for Hamburg, we have for Riyadh. What you can do is that you can play with this Lego, you can move the things and change the structure of the city, and you can simulate what happens. So for example, you can close a street and understanding how the traffic change. You can build a new building or like the Halbere here, and you can try to understand how many people will be there. And maybe this would be useful also in Trento, because you said then you can realize that no one is moving to these places. But so these are some of the examples. One interesting project that are doing in Hamburg with the city of Hamburg is understanding how to put in the different part of Hamburg how to build micro area for the refugee. So the idea is try to mix two things. One needs of having the family of the refugees together, or some of these refugees together, but on the other side avoiding ghettos or avoiding the choices that sometimes are done also by Italian policymakers that bring all the refugees in one of the neighborhood, usually the more far from the center or from the richer area, And so this has an impact on the people living there, because you change totally the place where they were living, and so you have reaction that are the reaction that you don't want. So something like an increase of racism or this kind of thing. So one of the ideas is try to understand which is the optimal amount of people you can send in these different areas, and also discuss with the population which is the optimal amount of people that they can they want to accept in the neighborhood. So these things are done partly also on this idea, and they are also moving this idea that United Nations is pushing of having a sort of data revolution. So there was this United Nations decide to define 70 Sustainable Development Goals, and all the country should work together to realize these goals. Goals are things like saving the climate, solving things like poverty and whatever. So the country that are member of the United Nations decide to have a plan for the 2030 to work on this goal. One of the things that the former General Secretary of the United Nations decided was put some people together. One of these guys was Sandy Pentland, that was my advisor when I was in MIT. Another guy is an Italian guy, Enrico Giovannini, who was a former Ministry of Labor here and was the head of this initiative. And they define a report where they say how the data can be used to sustain, to monitor, and to realize these sustainable development goals. So one of the problems of having all these things, of using data and having data-driven decision-making approaches for understanding, monitoring, and improving society, is that these things came with also problems. One of the problems are the violation of privacy. So you may have that some of these data are personal data, and so you may have violation of privacy. You may have problems about the transparency. So if the decisions are taken by algorithm, so the problem is that how the people can understand the decision of the algorithm. And also another things that usually there is this idea that a decision that is done based on data or based on algorithm is by nature or by definition more inclusive and less discriminatory, but this is not true, because the majority of the machine learning approach has ultimate goal a discriminative goal. So they want to discriminate people in classes. And usually it happens that, so it could be that your information make you, again, more difficult to, for example, having a credit if you are using this kind of information to give loan, and if you are a bank, or to give an insurance, and if you are an insurance company. So some of the people are trying to provide a solution, technical solution to this problem. For example, one of the things about the violation of privacy is this idea of having personal data stores, so the data are given back to the people. So something like the data that you leave on Facebook and now became your property. And this is was something that started this discussion in 2008 with the World Economic Forum meeting. And they are providing this kind of technology. So one guy that is working, for example, in these things is Tim Berners-Lee, another researcher. Then you have a way to try to also legislation way to improve the transparency. There is a legislation in Europe that is very different and maybe better this time of the US one that will start in 2018. That is the data protection regulation, and the data protection regulation has the idea that you have the right to explanation. So if you take a decision, if you are a bank, you decide to don't give a credit to me, I can ask to you why this happened. You need to say if this is done by an algorithm, which are the features that count, which is the process that make you to decide to not give a credit to me. There are also very technical solutions for the problem of the discrimination and social exclusion. So there are ways in trying to statistically balance the decision for the different classes. So this is the general idea that we tried when we wrote this paper that was also described and taken by Bloomberg. What we try to say are the requirements that make possible a positive disruption of data-driven policy. So the first one is, as I say, the idea of having a user-centric data ownership, having accountability of algorithms. So we need that the algorithms that are deciding they should be, you should ask to explanation, you should be able to ask for accountability of this algorithm. And also, you need places where you test this kind of data-driven policy. So one of the approach could be this living lab approach where you take a city. This is something that we are trying to do in several cities. We are starting from Bogota and Dakar. We are now moving to Singapore. You take a city, you ask all the data of the cities, and then you monitor things, and then you try to also do policy that are based on data. So you decide, for example, support of to the income based on data simulation. You decide how to fight the crime based on data, based on the data you are collecting. But you do in a sort of way that is really a sort of a living lab. So you try some of the policy, then something doesn't work, and then you come back, and something like this. So you try to put an approach to the policy making that is not an algorithmic approach, but is more a scientific approach. So like testing, and then changing your hypothesis, and then retesting. That is something that policy making is not doing right now. So related to the privacy problem, this is a work that was done by a guy in MIT. It's a very important work. It was done with two data sets, one with the call detail record and one with transaction of credit card. What he was able to show is that only using 4 spatial-temporal points of a person, you can identify that the trace left by the person is a unique trace. So the guy is a single guy. So there is only a unique trace of this person. This doesn't mean that you are able to understand that this guy is Bruno, but it's very easy if you know that this person is always the same person, if you have some external information to understand that this guy is Bruno. So, and this is also if you anonymize. So what does it mean? That the anonymization like it's done in the company doesn't make any sense. So this is my last slide. So this is a project that we are right now doing with several partners. So we are trying to do these things of having a way and technological way to share data between company, between entity, but not only data, but also algorithms. So the idea is that to make your data really safe, the data should be always encrypted under the wall of the company. And what moves is not the data, but is the algorithm. So if you are a telco and you need to have some information from a bank, you move the algorithm under the firewall of the bank. The bank run the algorithm on encrypted data and give back to you an answer. So this is the final one. So several challenges are also starting on using this data. These are the old ones. So we did one in a couple of them in Italy with Telecom Italia. There was a couple of them organized by Orange, one in Ivory Coast and one in Senegal. There is right now one open. The deadline for proposing project is the 10th of April. It's done by the United Nations with a lot of partners. They are providing Twitter data, global Twitter data and other social media data since the last 5 years. They are providing CDR for 3 or 4 countries, Morocco, Senegal, France. They are providing bank transaction in all the Spain, weather data, and a lot of other data. So if you want, if you are an hacker, you want to do something with this, write a proposal, try to be accepted, and then take the data and then decide. And if you win a prize, the prize is also good. I think it's 10,000 K, so it's 10,000 bucks. I think. So this is my presentation. Thanks.
Well, it was really fascinating, for me at least. Discussion, a couple of questions.
Hi, thanks. It was really interesting. I was wondering, how do you, like when you use all this data to predict how like a city is going to move, for example, from mobile phones, how do you assess the coverage of your data? Like, couldn't it be biased by the fact that you use only data from a part of the city? For example, with mobile phones, you don't really consider like older people. And how do you avoid a bias of this sort?
Yeah, so you have some way to understand which is the kind of noise that you have having, for example, a coverage that is the 35% or something like this. In general, for example, in Italy, when you have data from Telecom Italia, you have almost in all the places the 33% of the coverage of the population. That is something that no sociologist had in all the life, because so usually what you do, for example, when you do a study on survey and something like this, so you can have a panel of 3,000, 4,000 people or this kind of thing. So in any way, so there are ways to weight a little bit the things. But so I don't think the coverage is it's a very big problem. What is emerging a little bit from a technical point of view is that while some years ago the CDR data in particular, when you use the data from the company, are event driven. So the information that you have, you get when you have an event. So you know if a person is moving, if the person called now, and then call in another moment, in another place, and is connected to another cell tower. So what is happening, looking at the studies, is that things like, for example, the SMS or the call are not anymore so useful. For predicting the mobility of the people is very useful now, looking at the internet, so the traffic of the data, the internet connection. Because every person right now is checking the mail or everything very, very frequently, and or as application on the ground. And so it's with this kind of data, you have also a solution a little bit, because so before you have something that was sparse. Right now you have something that is more similar to a GPS trace. It is something that is not useful to have from a company. But so this is a little bit more the technical things. The coverage in general, so it's statistically you can solve. A lot of people are not giving a lot of research too much attention, because in any way, so you are better than your competitors, than the traditional sociologists.
More questions?
I've noticed that you have mentioned the fact that next year there will be a regulation allowing people to ask companies, for example, you mentioned banks, why they are not given credits. So I love this idea, but as good as an idea can be, how do you put that in practice? Because how do you explain deeply to a customer, my algorithm has done this, has done that? It is not so easy.
No, it's not easy at all, and I don't have, I think, the right question. So I think it's a problem of research. There are people working several groups on this topic. So the problem can have different flavor. One of the things can be the algorithm should be accountable. So maybe there is another automatic process that make the algorithm accountable, and this is enough. Different is that the algorithm should be able to be explained to everyone, because in this case you need really to, I don't know, report which are the features that count, or having way to visualize how you take a decision. But the algorithms are not all the same. So the decision tree is something that you can easily try to explain, or a simple regression. You weight the feature and you show which are the features that count, which are the beta in the regression that count. But explain a deep learning algorithm, I don't know, sometimes also the people that build the algorithm or run the experiment, they don't understand which are the features that really are working, how they are mixed together to make the algorithm be so effective. So I think it's a big problem. I think it's a very strong regulation. I don't know how the company will move, and I'm not totally sure that the European company really understand that this is the idea is that you have technique inside to try to start to do this kind of things. I think my feeling working with some of the companies that they think, okay, yes, so there is a legislation, but then it will be a little bit different in the real work and in the daily work. So let's see. So what they need to do is that they need to show that they are moving to be compliant with this regulation. Let's see. So I don't know. I don't know if the European banks are doing or the telco are really doing.
Good question. Any more? Well, I have a final question. Oh, you have one as well?
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. You want to go first?
Yes, please. No, from my perspective, a lot of what you're doing is similar to what I see on SimCity. But on a physical scale, so this is much more accurate. I'd love to know if you discover something like very surprising from a European perspective, gathered from data, which you would not expect, like thinking on an abstract point of view, or something like sociologists say, then that you said data and you saw that it wasn't like that.
So there are some trend that works. That I think is the more interesting thing, because so every time you find a thing also in a scientific paper, so you need to understand how. So these are observational studies. So you should every time be taking with a lot of so to be trust not too much in some sense, because you cannot really understand which are the causes and the effect of the thing. Anyway, so there is a trend that is emerging from all these studies. That is the role that diversity in behavior, diversity in social relationship is having. But this is something that sociologists do not give too much attention, I think. That there were other people, like the complex system people, that show how the things emerge in a complex way, how the diversity. There is a very nice book by Scott Page. It is a Santa Fe complex system guy. So this is something that is emerging in all the studies, so you can say that this is a signal that is resistant to the noise. It means that diversity is important at the individual level, make you more happy, the diversity of interaction, make you more productive, and also it's important at the societal level, so make a societal more safe, more productive, and this kind of thing. So this is what is emerging. And I think has a very influential role in the study of the society. This is it's maybe the more important message. And other things that we are doing right now that I don't know how much surprising is. So we are doing a work on segregation, looking at the income segregation. So how the residential segregation. By income and by political opinion. So where the people live, and this is something that sociology studied for a while. So there is a model, an old model from Shelley that was about the segregation at the residential level, and we are looking also at the online segregation. So what is emerging, and this is something that again is emerging also in other studies, like all the things of the echo chambers and this kind of information, is emerging that online you segregate yourself more than in the physical life. So you tend to stay with your the people that are similar to you more than in the physical life. And if you come back to the model of Schelling, the model of Schelling say that so you have a chessboard with a black and white ball and pawn, and you can, if you are a white pawn with all the black pawn around you, you want to move where the white are, because this is the homophily. So you tend to stay with the people like you. So you want to move. So the things that we are realizing a little bit is that when you do in your daily life, you have constraint. So maybe you want to move, but you don't have the money to move. So you need to stay there. So you need to mix with people that are different from you. While on internet and online, there is no cost. And so the tendency is that all the time you move to the place where you prefer, and you connect with the people you prefer because you don't have any cost. So the idea that was in the 90s that internet was something that could make in the end of 90s, so could make you to speak with the President Obama or to speak with people different from you, is not true, because so you don't want. At the end you don't want, and so you stay with people like you. So having no cost makes you more segregated than when you are in the real life. And again, this is, we are trying right now to look if this model mathematically can explain things like why a second generation person lived in France, in Paris, decide that the life he likes is in Syria and not in Paris. This is quite strange. So if you think, no? So if you born and grow up in a city that is more safe, why should you want to go in a place far to fight a war that is not your war? Right.
Awesome. Big applause. And actually, regarding echo chambers and this topic, we will have the second speaker that is sitting down there, Michele Fazzi. Now we're going to have a small break, 5 minutes, get a beer, get some stuff there, you can drop a coin.
Michele, please come here.
Some people said that some people had troubles because the Sweden 1, 2, 5, 10 euros is not true. It can be 50 cents, it can be 1 cent, it can be nothing. It's just to tell you, if you want to donate something.
Yeah, even 100 euro. We saw at least 10 guys from you. Thank you very much. See you in...
See you in 5 minutes.
Yes.